And then
right? Yeah, and
he did it on the screen on his Baja slide. To get her PowerPoint.
okay. So you just
Yeah, it's duplicated, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Oh, no worries. And then I can open up, I can see who's in, am I gonna be able to see at all?
Yeah, and this will show you can play grid mode. You want it,
like that.
Okay, but I'm not gonna be able to see like, so far they're just, yeah, okay. Well, I'm. About it. Okay.
If you need anything, you can use the you get the white column and then that will bring anything directly to us and we'll run out here.
Yeah, I'll take them. I should have put it on. I stand here. I stand here. And then stand there. Yeah. Did I? Like, I was like she was saying that. Yeah, it's good. Yeah, I'm well, yeah, I'm trying to order a burrito if they speak Spanish. There's one person. Wow, you are your mind. It's like I was like already. I was like, yeah, to be like, that's what y'all say that. Hi everyone, and welcome to our side session. I'm sure a couple of
people might still be coming in. So I'd encourage you to join us on the AHA slides. We'd love to get your thoughts around a couple of questions that we have put up there on to start kicking this off on this discussion around a debate and discussion on the powers and pitfalls of human-centered design. So you can use the QR code, or you can join us using the ahaslides.com/H9J6D. And we have a couple of questions. HCD is a simple silver bullet. It's a simple solution that can solve all problems. Using HCD ensures that an activity will be inclusive. And our third question, which is failure is acceptable in a project. And for those of you joining us online, please go ahead. You can use the QR code, or you can type in the code to kick off this session. Now, I hope I'm not biasing the responses by sharing in real time what others are responding. I would hide it, but anyway. Lots of interesting, and you can interact with us throughout the session using AHA slides as well as in real life as well. You've seen lots of hearts and emojis. Great. So my name is Nicole Weber, and I'm the WASH Technical Director for a project funded by USAID Bureau for Humanitarian Assistance, which is known as ProWASH and Scale. So we work with partners that have USAID BHA funding, and we support them on capacity strengthening, learning, and research. So I'm really excited today to be moderating a session that we have pulled together with some of our partners. And so today you will hear from IDE, CARE, Toronto WASH, and the Takunda Resilience Food Security Activity. In addition, we also have Jess MacArthur, who is online. She is our research and learning advisor for ProWASH and Scale. And so she'll be moderating the chat box and the Q&A, and also will be presenting some of the tools during today's session. So looking for the welcome activity, I see that failure is acceptable in a project. Lots of agrees on that, and a lot of disagreement on HCD is a silver bullet or a simple solution that can solve all problems, and kind of middle feelings around whether or not using HCD will ensure that an activity will be inclusive. So today's agenda, we're going to start with a welcome and an introduction to human-centered design. We were going to do small breakout groups, but we started thinking about, this is a 5-day conference, it's day 4, it's after lunch, there might be a little bit of fatigue with small groups. So we did some quick, using some human-centered design and iterative approaches. And this is how we added some emojis. So now you're no longer going to get in a group and try out a tool, but you're going to see some tools. And then we're going to do a larger group reflection and getting some thoughts from our panelists and from you around what do you see is really the power and the pitfalls from using human-centered design. So here we're really to talk about the core process of human-centered design through case-based examples. We're going to look at how it can support adaptive management and program improvements. But we also want to discuss ways to integrate diversity, equity, and inclusion principles into the human-centered design process to ensure that it's accessible and responsive to the needs of diverse stakeholders. And we want to discuss challenges and brainstorm some of the solutions to human-centered design. You'll also have a chance to get some resources that you can use in the future, a website, as well as a PDF where we've compiled a lot of human-centered design resources. And so from the first part of that quick survey check, we saw that we heard from people that failure is acceptable in a project. So we want to also create a safe space in which we can talk about the ways that projects have failed, whether or not that was using human-centered design or not, I think we want to create that space. And we also, really are coming out of a really interesting plenary session this morning where I have learned a lot. And I would also like us to maybe consider some of the things we heard during the plenary during this session as well. So that is all for me. I will be happy now to turn it over to Delilah, who will take us through human-centered design and kick us off with some case studies as well.
Thanks, Nicole. Good afternoon, everyone. So my name is Delilah Takawira. I work as a social and behavior change technical advisor based in Zimbabwe, which is down in Southern Africa. And I'm working on the Takunda Resilience and Food Security Activity, which is a USAID-funded intervention, which is led by K International. I work with FHI 360, and we are the SBC technical partner in the RIFSA. So I'm going to just start by giving you an overview of what HCD is about, and I'm hoping that some of you have already had a chance to talk about this. So it is really an approach that puts the perspectives of end users right from the beginning to the end as you're working towards developing products, services, and systems that addresses key challenges amongst a key population. It uses a mixture of listening and observing methods, and also engages people in generative methods. It usually follows an iterative process, and you saw us actually adapting and iterating earlier this afternoon. But it's an iterative process of designing, building, and testing, working together with the communities or the people that you intend to build services for. It aims to find that sweet spot that balances desirability, viability, and feasibility. It can be used to design products, services, businesses, and even marketing strategies. So there's a wide variety of ways you can use this approach. It has a strong emphasis on prototyping and testing, co-creating, and working with the users that you are designing for. Sorry. Okay, so in terms of process, it follows these three phases, starting with hearing or discovering with the users that you're working with, and then going into creation, creating a suite of potential concepts, and bringing solutions to scale. So this process aligns very closely with the action research cycle of observing, reflecting, acting, and evaluating. Action research is a philosophy which seeks transformative change through simultaneous process of taking action and doing research at the same time. So in HCD, like in action research, the process is as important as the output. So we're not just focusing on getting an output, but the process in itself is important as you work to developing the solutions with the target people. These are the key mindsets, or should I say values or attitudes that inform HCD. It's rooted in empathy, participation, creativity, working together with the target people that you're working to develop services or products for. It uses frequent iterations. So iteration is one of the key mindsets. To improve solutions by leveraging rapid prototyping techniques, working with the target communities or target population. It also works with building trust, collaboration, allowing discomfort, as Nicole said earlier, and embracing complexity. You know, you're working with communities that have wide differences of people that you want to benefit. Need to embrace this complexity, understand their needs, the way they view things and see things, and ensure that the services being provided best meets their needs. And now I'm going to go into sharing a case study of how Takunda has used HCD in sanitation promotion. So as way of background, while Zimbabwe has made a lot of progress in the last 20 years in terms of sanitation promotion, we still have a significant population that still practices open defecation, estimated at around 35%. And that mirrors what is happening in the 4 districts in the southeast of Zimbabwe, where Takunda is working. And one of the interventions that Takunda is doing is promoting improved sanitation. And you can see the sanitation ladder on the far right there. So now talking about the initial phase, the year phase, where you work with communities to understand their needs, we started by honing in on the key objective of using this approach for sanitation promotion. So it was focusing on identifying the barriers and enablers to construction and use of improved sanitation within the communities that we're working in, focusing on, is there particular latrine designs that would motivate people to want to build latrines and to use them consistently? Are there any private sector players that could be involved in the process to make sure that more and more people build and use latrines? Are there any financing mechanisms that could also benefit the communities to be able to construct latrines? Because what we had in the formative research is that financing, poverty, lack of money was one of the reasons why people were not building latrines. And then also just trying to check the knowledge levels of the people that we're working with in terms of sanitation and understanding the widely promoted ventilated improved latrine. So to do this, we used what is called deep dive research. So deep dive research aims for depth with a smaller sample, rather than going for breadth where you talk to many people with a larger sample size. This allows the research to remain open to new lines of inquiry and to follow emergent stories as they occur. So we went to this number of villages, conducted focus group discussions, we had household visits, we had discussion with communities, different stakeholders, different groups of people. We use latrines in households. We also talked to local government extension workers who work in communities to promote improved sanitation. We spoke to latrine builders and also private sector suppliers of latrine construction materials. We also conducted observations of community triggering activities within the community using the CLTS approach. So what then did we see? So what we found is we identified about 4 motivations for latrine construction. So these are what we call household personas in the HCD language. And these were either people were replacing broken down latrines, or they had been triggered and they saw the need to construct a latrine within their household, or there were households that had the resources and they wanted to build a very beautiful latrine that mirrors what they see in urban areas. What you can actually see right there is actually a latrine and not a house. And then also out of shame. So when people are getting visitors that are coming, say, from the city or from elsewhere, or when they feel that for us to have dignity, we need to have the latrine. So when people visit us, will not be embarrassed. So those were the 4 personas that we identified as motivation for latrine construction. I'll not go through everything that is on this slide, but one key thing I want to highlight here is when we started this process, we thought that, when we started this process, we thought that there was a particular latrine design besides the government promoted ventilated improved pit latrine. In Zimbabwe, we call it the Blair ventilated improved pit latrine, which is, the Blair comes from the institution, the research institution that developed it. So we thought maybe there was a particular design that people would want that is not the same as the BVIP that is widely promoted, that people may want to construct. But then what we found is that they actually widely accepted this. But then what we found is that people were not very much aware of the key safety features of the BVIP, which resulted in them constructing structures like these ones that are not safe because they do not contain the key safety features of the BVIP. Some of the key things that we actually found by interacting with the different groups within households that use these latrines included things like the current design has a squat wall, which uses a squat wall. And then we found that elderly people, women, men alike, they have challenges with squatting, arthritis and sore knees. So squatting was a challenge. So people end up innovating and building sits that they can sit on, or buying the same sits that are used in urban areas that are not designed appropriately to ensure hygiene. I know this may not be a very good picture to look at, sorry. We also found that squat wall sizes and shapes were not built according to the guidelines. So they were either too small or too big, which affected use. We also found that in rural Zimbabwe, latrines are also used as bathrooms. So this is where people go into bath. And the current design to allow for free circulation of air, it does not have a door. So when we spoke to girls in particular, they had challenges using these open latrines because they did not feel safe. They were worried each time that they were in there bathing. They were worried that somebody could actually just storm in. So they preferred having doors. So because of that, we ended up having people constructing latrines that have doors. But this affects the safety features, the free air circulation of the ventilated improved pit latrine. We also found that toilet paper is a challenge, quite a significant challenge in the communities that we're working in. And people end up using some materials that they throw into the pit, which contribute to the pit filling too quickly. And while hand washing was acknowledged as important, none of the observed latrines had a functional hand washing system outside or close to it. We also found that some of the PHHE, participatory health and hygiene materials that were developed long back, some of the pictures that are within these materials ended up, they were communicating a wrong message, for example, covering the squat wall, which affects free air circulation and the safety features of the BVIP. But we also found that latrine builders who were being trained using this, they actually liked these very old materials because they found them as clear and straightforward. Now, using all this information, we then moved into the second stage, which is the create phase. And for this, we're focusing on now, how might we encourage the construction and safe and sustainable latrines in Takunda with all this in mind and those personas that we had identified. So we narrowed this into more like 3 broad areas. I'll not go into detail because of time. So the first thing was to review and design complementary behavior change tools, starting with making sure people understand the safety features of the BVIP. That helped in ensuring that as people were constructing latrines, there's a recommended way of constructing what is called an upgradable version, where you have your pit, the slab, the walls and the structure can be used, you can use materials that are cheap, that you can then build into a firm structure when you have the resources, but all the way maintaining the key safety features of the BVIP. We also worked on designing capacity strengthening tools for private sector. So we found there were private suppliers or sellers of materials for constructing latrines, the cement, the vent pipes, the fly screens, but these people did not even understand what the recommended VIP latrine should look like. And because of that, they were missing an opportunity to ensure that as people were buying materials, they could bundle them and say, okay, are you going to construct a latrine? Make sure you also buy a fly screen, or make sure you also buy a vent pipe to ensure that people can construct the right safe latrines. We also worked on updating and clarifying latrine designs and related technical documentation. We ended up coming up with 3 variations of the BVIP that take into consideration the different classes of people that we're working with. So the prestige version, which includes toilet seats, but that are designed appropriately to ensure hygiene, towels and all the things that people would want. And also a simpler, cheaper version that still maintains the safety features, but uses less cement, but of a higher strength. So these are some of the stuff that we ended up developing. And then in the deliver phase, which we are currently in now, we are now working on supporting the construction of safe and sustainable latrines in the working areas, but also going back to understand, are there any further challenges? Remember the iterative process of FCD. So integrating complementary behavior change tools and community engagements, using latrine builders or training latrine builders as also latrine promoters, because we identified that they were just being used as contractors that wait to get jobs, but they were not approaching households, for example, to say, we see you don't have a toilet, I've been trained as a latrine builder, could I construct one for you? And also working with private sector suppliers of building materials to ensure that when they sell some of the materials for constructing latrines, they sell them as a package that is complete. And then also fostering relationships with government stakeholders and other local service providers within the communities to ensure continued support beyond Takunda. That's about it. You can actually see more. We'll share some of these things, the learning brief and the video that we developed out of this work. Thank you.
Save your questions because we will have some time after her presentation to open up for Q&A. Write them down.
Okay, so hello everyone. I'm Harsu. I'm from the Runwash. I worked for the Runwash project. And so I'm going to present the case study of the Runwash project, which was implemented in Madagascar. So the Runwash was a 6-year project funded by USAID and implemented in Madagascar by a consortium led by CARE with CRS, WaterAid, and 2 local private sector from Bushpok and Sandajan. The project partnered with IDE to pilot a market-based sanitation model in one region using the human-centered design approach to increase access to basic sanitation services. After the hear, discover phase, the objective was to use prototyping techniques and testing to develop what we called an aspirational product and test a brand and related marketing materials and tools, messages, and channels. So here, we are just going to focus on prototyping and the testing phase. We can see some of the results we learned after the discovery phase. Delilah talked about the 3 phases of human-centered design. And for example, we discovered the values for having an aspirational toilet, such as privacy. And we also discovered the drivers like durability, smell, which was really important. And I think it's important for all of us, not just for the users in Madagascar. Or also popularity, you know, like they have this beautiful toilet, so I'd like to have the same. So these are the drivers. Someone has an iPhone, I'd like also to have this iPhone. So these are the drivers to have the toilet. We also had features of what makes a toilet aspirational, like what kind of pit, slab, or superstructure. Or even what colors are the most attractive. And I believe we discovered blue and green was found very attractive to the future user of the toilet that we wanted to design. So the create phase allowed us to develop some real life prototypes. So we did prototyping in one town. But you can see here, these are the superstructure. There were slabs with sato plans, circular or square pits, elevated or underground. These were all discovered after the hear and the discovery phase. All of these characteristics were given by the end users, right? So we also developed some marketing tools during this phase. You can see here, for example, posters, also pitch deck, that are to be used by the local masons and the sales agents to conduct sales, business cards, which made the local masons really proud, because they have business cards and with their contact number, and they can give to the customers, and then it makes them proud, like they are doing something really important. They are business owners, not just local masons. So that was really important. And we also developed uniforms for these business entrepreneurs. So we organized a 3-day exhibition event in the town to test those tools and also to test all those prototypes and get feedbacks and comments from customers and end users to allow us to bring some modifications and ensure the designed products meet the needs of the end users and the customers. That was because that's all part of the HCD process, to get feedbacks and comments, and then for the end users to be satisfied with the products that they are going to purchase, because they are going to buy to use their money. They need to be satisfied, right? So what are the lessons learned? So, and many lessons learned. I'm just going to focus on 3 things for today. So first is the power of the prototyping and testing process, because this can support sales in the long term. You are sure you are selling the right products because it's based on the needs and aspirations of the end users. So that was really important. We also discovered the power of remote co-design, because we worked with IDE, and so and we are going to talk about localization afterwards. So IDE did not come to Madagascar. They supported the project remotely, and we had a local team doing everything. And it was really important because for us, it was also an opportunity for the local team to learn about HCD, about how to do the HCD process and how to develop products based on end users' aspirations. So it was really important. Finally, the power of HCD, as I say, to develop attractive products. We are always talking about market-based approaches. We are always talking about selling. So that is really important. We need the products that meet the needs of the consumers, because they won't use their money with inappropriate products. So that was a very rapid, short presentation sharing about handwash case studies, that you can learn more at the website of the project, that www.handwash.org, if you are interested. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you, Harisu. Okay, so my name is Melissa Lenero. I am from IDE, and I'm a senior design manager there. And yeah, I was supporting alongside with IDE. I was supporting Harisu in the project that she presented. So for now, we're going to have a Q&A, which is a part 1 of the Q&A. Because we are designers and HCD practitioners, we like to get your questions and be more participatory. So this session is, for now, we're going to open it for questions, and then we will continue with a session that is going to be showing you the HCD for Wash website, and then opening for a panel discussion with the people that you have seen already. So any questions so far about the 2 case studies or HCD in general? Or everything was very clear?
Do I need a microphone?
I don't know.
Probably. Maybe for the Zoom.
Right. Yeah.
Thanks so much for the presentations. Kelly would care, but I was not involved in Takunda or Rana Wash part of this HCD process. So apologies for my ignorance, but can you talk a little bit about maybe in the Rana Wash program, how latrine sales might have been affected by all of this process? That's one hard question. The second one is an easy question. I really liked your point about remote technical support actually was helpful, because from what I heard from that was that it empowered the local team to be able to take the skills and take what they learned virtually, I guess, and apply them. So I'd just love to hear a little bit more about that.
Oh, okay, go ahead.
Yeah, I had a question on the first presentation. So you spoke about, in great presentation, by the way, you spoke about doing a deep dive instead of going like broad. And I wanted to ask what advice you have if someone wants to do that, because there can be issues of navigating like power dynamics where, because you're entering into a community, you might end up just talking to one, part of the community and not really getting a representation of what the whole community wants. So how do you navigate that?
So can we just reply to the first two questions and then can you just hold it a second? So for your first question about pursuit, you want to go ahead? I can support as well.
Okay. Okay, so
here, holding the microphone so then everyone at the back can listen.
Okay, so the first question was about the effect on the sales, right? And then the second part of the question was about the remote co-design. Okay, so on the effect of the sales. So it was during I talked about the 3-day exhibition event, and it was really powerful because it was like people were coming. It's a rural town, in rural Madagascar, and people were coming and they saw the prototypes and they were saying like, wow, we never imagined that what we shared and that we wanted to have was constructed and built and presented to us. Because these models, this kind of models, they are mostly present in the capital, and for maybe we could say rich people, but not model as for us in the rural areas. So there were a lot of interest, and there were direct orders done to the local masons. However, and that is maybe because a second part of our exercise is about the power and the pitfalls, right? The support must continue. And when we are talking about human-centered design, it is not just about designing the product, but it is also really supporting the market systems and supporting all the businesses to really produce sustainably their products and then to how do you say to fulfill capacity to fulfill the demand, and that is maybe one of lessons learned from Randwash, is because we started kind of late in the project on this process. So we could have, I think, if we started a bit earlier, we could have really supported more strongly those businesses, and then we would have had more results on number of sales. Yeah. And the second is about remote localization. As I said, it was good because now we have 4 Malagasy people who worked with IDE, who knows how to do HCD. And that is, I think that is really important for localization. It is not just people with the concepts and doing the exercise, but it was really building the capacity of a local team, and then they could reproduce the process with other products because they have a mindset. So that I think that is what I call with localization and building local capacity, which I really appreciate with during our collaboration. Thank you. If you want to
go ahead. Great question on the deep dive approach. And that's actually a potential pitfall I was going to mention later, you know. So you're trying to balance the two. But you'll see on one of the tools we're going to talk about, the participatory tools that you use to engage the communities during the year phase sort of help to ensure that, because for any intervention or solution or product you're trying to develop, the first thing is to map out who are your key stakeholders, who are the key users, and ensure that as you go out to discover and learn from them, you include all the different groups of people that are involved in the use of that product. So it is actually very, very important. You may have some as you're starting when you do the scoping and all, but as you start the process, you continue to get more people that you need to talk to, and you need to ensure that you do that.
Thank you. Sorry, do you have any other questions? Yeah.
I worked at it from South Africa. I was wondering how much in different experiences, like you've seen fundamentally different kind of products that have been brought in from UCD. So for example, in the Zimbabwe example, went through the process and came up with in Mongolia we did learn. And some of the communities are, all right, great, you're gonna design something different. And then we came back with something that was like, all right, we thought it was gonna be really different. It's kind of same thing. So I didn't know to what extent there's the kind of how it is influenced by what people are familiar with locally, and that kind of like really bringing in new ideas from other places, other contexts, really think outside the box and how to enable that, I guess.
Exactly. That's an important question too. Of course, people, what they already know, what they used to, tends to influence what they do. But it's important using the participatory methods of engaging the communities. I think this is where you can identify the challenges that they're facing with maybe the current design. For example, while the people liked the VVIP, there were still issues with the spotting for elderly people and the need for maybe elevated seats. So I think it's all in the in how you engage the communities in understanding them and the different stakeholders that you talk to. And then it's also an iterative process. You may actually, maybe if you go back and people have used this, maybe 3 designs that we've talked about, you may actually identify that there's more that is coming up that people would want to see. So there's also room and scope to go back and see if we can try something different. That's what I would say.
Yeah, I think that is a very good question that most of the times we face with. So what is the innovation that you are doing? Because at the end it's the same toilets or some of the same toilets. And let's be honest, we also are in a capitalist world that we have to, account for supply and demand. So we cannot come with a very, I'm just going to say like innovative solution that we're not using cement anymore because that's not in the power of the economics. So in that case, HED, what really does is, besides what Delilah has already mentioned, it also increases the chances of adoption and sustainability of the product. We have seen more and more that in WASH, the adoption of latrines, sometimes it falls, right? So you have a latrine that or a product or a service that is around in WASH in a community, and eventually people go back to either open defecation or like stop washing their hands, or like behavior is difficult to change. So this process is, as we said at the beginning, is not exactly a silver bullet, but it's putting the product or the service or the solution in a better position to be sustainably adopted across time. We have, go ahead. She beat you to it.
And you also repeat the question because they can't hear online the question. That mic only works for the room.
Oh, yes.
I was going to ask about if you can comment about the iterative process, because I think it's nice on paper, but how how is it on the ground? Say you have invested all of the resources and time into going one direction, and then months into the implementation, you realize that you need to make a complete 180 shifts. How flexible is the funding? How flexible is the organizational policy to do that and actually implement it?
Yeah, she's asking about like the iterative process. If we can give elaborate more a little bit on that, because budgets have constraints and also time-wise. And probably I butchered your question, but that's what I got. I think for that, I will pass it to Haisu, because this is a great way that we can explain. I think in the case of Rano and IDE, the iterative process was very important for us. And one of the issues I remember, and this is more like a anecdote, that we were telling the team in Madagascar, I don't know if you remember, Haisu, that we were telling the team in Madagascar, okay, we've got all this research, we've done, we already have like the aspiration, we have identified an aspirational persona, like, which is the aspirational traveler. We're not going to go into detail with that, but basically we identified the person that was our entry point for selling the trains in Madagascar. And I remember that we told the team in Madagascar, actually, so we budgeted for a couple of weeks, but actually we're going to go work for a month. And Haisu was like, no. So that was one of the issues that we had with iteration. And that is one of the issues also that happened with human-centered design, because you don't know what you don't know, and you go into the field with an open mind of understanding, I don't know what is out there. Like I have some assumptions or early ideas, or I've seen that some products or services work in a different context, but you're going to be changing context and people change, culture change. So we need to be agile on that. So what we did, we had the same budget, but what we did is internally we discussed, okay, if we're going there for a month, what are the different changes in budget that we can do? So changing the budget from one bucket to the other bucket, that eventually is going to help us to be there for a month and test it in the field for the 3 days that Harisu was saying. So the iterative process can be from since the beginning. Now what we do as like the design process, what we do is we go into the field and since the beginning, since day 1 or 2 or 3, we're still testing. So we do early testing. So this is I think a misconception that design has, that you have to have your research very well done, and then eventually you test and prototype. You can do prototyping since the beginning. You have some ideas that might work in different contexts. So why don't you just go and test instead of asking people what you want? Show them, as we did with some of the examples, some of the photos, some of the other materials that have used in a different context. So that's, I don't know if I answered your question, but I tried.
Can we ask, we want to be inclusive of those joining online. So Jess has noted that there's a question in the chat box. Jess, can you unmute and go ahead and read the question and respond?
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for letting me join, everyone. This is Jess joining in from Switzerland tonight. So we have a question around recommendations of how this type of approach can be used in collaboration with academic research, because academic research protocols don't always allow for this type of flexibility. And just to give a couple of ideas of how this could work, the Takunda study was basically in its entirety 6 weeks. Of work. 4 of those weeks were on the ground and 2 of those weeks were online. So this is not long periods of time, but because you're allowing teams to really focus in and you try to get them not to work on other things when they're working on this, you give yourself an ability to really spend concerted time and concerted effort, which I think can be quite helpful. So that's one kind of thought bubble. The other is that I've had some success in putting in academic protocols that are under the umbrella of action research, in which you're doing a series of rapid studies under the action research umbrella. And a lot of IRBs allow for that kind of approval under the action research umbrella using participatory type of research methods. But if anyone is curious about how to make that bridge between kind of the academic protocol, feel free to reach out to me. I'll make sure that my email is in the chat. Thanks, everyone.
Right. Yeah, so let's continue with the presentation, and then we'll have also some time at the end to have more questions. And after the side event, you can also reach to us, and then we can also have another discussion, which we love to talk about design. So why are we talking about design in the first place in this at the UNC? So there was a combination or an effort or partnership with ProWash with IDE to understand what are the materials, the design materials and the design process that we can share with WASH practitioners. Part of the research, we did a whole HED process to understand what are the materials that we can share or how we can share the materials. I don't know if you were familiar with HED before, but HED, you can go to different sites and you can learn about design in different sites, but some of them are not tailored for WASH practitioners, and you don't want to be designers. You want to be WASH practitioners, but be inclusive or using these participatory methods. So that was the efforts that we had and the partnership that we embarked on. And at the end of around a year of partnership and asking different WASH practitioners, what were the barriers, the challenges that you were facing when you wanted to make your project or your processes more participatory? What were the tools that were helpful for you if you have used HED before? Or going back to your question about iteration, how donors also see HED, because usually HED is not budgeted in the project. So what are those challenges that we are facing as WASH practitioners to have a more inclusive work? So at the end of the year partnership, we, as a co-creative process with some of you, we designed the hedforwash.org, and here it's a website it's an open website. It's in English and in French, and you can learn more about the whole process, the design process. You can learn about the 3 stages: discover, experiment, and deliver. You can also have access to templates. We share with you some of the case studies. Let me just show you very quick the website, which is here. So we have videos explaining to you what is HED, how this is important for WASH practitioners. You can learn about HED in WASH. You can also learn about specific case studies that uses HED in the WASH sector. And also we want to clarify that WASH, here we're bringing the 2 examples in the trees, but also we acknowledge that it's also in sanitation and in menstrual health and hygiene, for example, and different sectors. So we have examples and inspiration, and what we're very proud of is that you can also go to these tools, the last part, and this part of the tools, then you can see all the resources. You can filter the tools in the different sections of discover, experiment, and deliver, or you can also see the different examples that we bring to you, where are different articles or videos or templates or case studies or even academic research on what research says about design and WASH. So as I said, they are in English and French, and this is open to everyone. Okay, so what we want to do now, yes. What we're going to do now is, after we presented the HED for WASH, we're going to present to you 4 tools, and with these 4 tools, then we can open the panel discussion. So here you have an opportunity to see a tool. As we said before, we were going to build a tool, but because we are very participatory, we changed it to now you're going to see a tool in the room. And do you want to go ahead and explain the 4 different tools?
Should I explain difference mapping?
So while before is distributing a canvas of the tools, the first tool that we'll talk about is difference mapping. So this is a participatory activity that you can conduct with the different groups of people that you're working with that explores how different types of people experience changes differently. It aims to understand the intersectional dynamics and recognizes that not all people have the same experiences. So this activity adopts the HCD technique called empathy mapping, where researchers aim to understand the experiences of different types of people. So for example, the way we used it in the Takunda HCD study, the focus for us was latrine access and use. So we sat down with different household members and different participants, and then we asked, when you look at a rural household, who are the different people who use a latrine, for example? So there can be men, there's women, there's boys, there's girls. What do they use it for? What are their experiences in using it? This is where we got things coming in from girls saying that for us, we use latrines for bathing. It's not just for safe disposal of waste, but we use it for bathing. And when we are there, we don't feel safe. This is where we got now women saying for us, we use it, yes, for safe disposal of waste, but we have challenges with swatting because of the sparkles. So you can use this for any of the activities that you want to do. So for example, other focus areas could be purchasing a latrine, conducting a training, or you want to say construct a water point. And you can explore different things to do with gender, to do with different roles and responsibilities of people in the house. So for example, the people that are responsible for cleaning the latrine, what are the issues that they face? Do we need to take that into consideration as we're coming up with the design of the latrine that we want to promote? You can also talk about different age groups, different classes, different education levels. So all these are different people that we want to talk to and to explore what they think of when they think of latrine access and use at the household level. So with this, you can actually create like a mind map of the different experiences and what different people see or think when they think of the focus area or solution that you want to design for. I don't know if everybody got an example of this exactly.
Okay, so that was one tool. We are going to discuss a little bit. I'm going to present a little bit another tool of the HCD, which is journey mappings. I don't know, do you have the okay. So journey mapping has, as you can see here, is when we want to understand more about how a particular user or stakeholder performs a particular task. For example, we want to know what are involved in hand washing with soap, for example. So the task is, we'd like to, the outcome of the journey mapping is, we'd like to understand more what are all the challenges and what happens when we'd like to wash our hands with soap. So we do an interview with the stakeholder that we'd like to understand. And then we ask them to identify all the tasks that they have to perform, the steps that they have to perform to have to get the outcome, like washing my hands with soap. So all these steps can be, for example, fetching water, right? Taking soap, how to say?
Washing your hands.
Water in my hands, and then taking the soap, and then
Lathering.
brother, and then watering again, all of this. So in each step, we ask them to either to write these little steps down, or maybe to make drawings, you know, because when we are working, for example, in a rural setting or in any settings, maybe it is more comfortable to have drawings instead of writing. So we can use, for example, Post-it. And with each post-it, we write or we draw each step. And then we ask the stakeholder, what is the most difficult step that you perform when you do your journey mapping? What is the easiest? And when for example, what is the most difficult? And then they might answer to have water, because I have to, I have to walk, I don't know, 1 kilometer, or I have to spend 30 minutes to find water to wash my hands. So with this exercise, you can identify the pain points of practicing a specific behavior or specific task. And then you can ask with a stakeholder what might make things easier from their perspective. What can make performing this specific task, like purchasing a toilet, for example, washing your hands with soap, or washing a menstrual pad, what can make it easier? What are the pain points for you to perform this specific behavior? And then when you use this, then you can have different stakeholders, and then you can see the patterns of these are the pain points for acquiring this specific product or this specific service, or these are the most the easier steps for performing the specific behaviors or the specific product or services. Yeah. Okay, so journey mapping. You can try that.
Thank you. Great. So I'm going to ask Jess now to join us online and talk about Build-A-Loo, as well as an online version of a sanitation ladder activity.
Super, yeah. So Build-A-Loo is a really stupid name, but essentially, if you've ever built something out of Lego or something out of paper dolls, it's essentially merging a Lego option with paper dolls. And we don't have a picture of it here, but you take type parts of the latrine. So you can see actually in these images, you have the slab, you might have the vent pipe, you might have the door. You actually have them on individual cards, and kind of similar to a paper doll, if you're familiar with that concept, you encourage participants to build a dream latrine using their paper doll latrine components to build a budget latrine, and then to build a latrine that they think they could actually make tomorrow, or they could build in their community tomorrow. And you start to get an understanding of willingness to pay. You start to also get an understanding of what types of components people find more important in different areas. I can give an example of where the Build-A-Loo has been valuable in work in Bangladesh. We identified that different regions of the countries had different focuses on what was important in the toilet. So in the northern part of Bangladesh, where the groundwater was a little bit lower, the pit was the most important part of the latrine. But in the southern part of the country, where cyclones were more prevalent, the shelter was the most important part of the latrine. And that changed everything in the strategy. So you can think about how toilets would be marketed, how toilets would be sold, what types of things you want to focus on when you are encouraging a household to buy a latrine. It was a really great way of trying to understand those different pieces. And that was all basically, if you can think about it like paper dolls for toilets. You could also do it with water filters or other systems as well, but we've used it a lot with toilets, and it was actually used as one of the tools in Takunda. Another example, many of you might be familiar with the sanitation ladder activity. And what's interesting about this particular approach is that you have to, if you can be quite strategic about what you put in each of these images. You have here on the screen 10 different types of toilets. Some of them don't have a roof, some of them do, different pieces, different components, different materials. It was a strategic decision, and there are trade-offs embedded within this activity. And when what you do is you ask participants to rank the toilets from the worst toilet to the best toilet and to speak their decisions aloud. In Takunda, what we did is we broke the group into men and women. We started with a joint focus group and then broke them into men and women's groups and had them sort their latrines between from worst to best and speak about what they thought. So is the door, tell me about the door. You're going to put the door before or after, why? what does that mean to you? And then we were able to compare the differences between men and women. And the order of the cards is important, but more important is the process and the discussion that's happening as the participants are conducting this activity. So it becomes an activity or a participatory kind of focus group style. So these are just two tools. I use them all the time. I think they're quite valuable. Yeah. Wonderful.
Thank you so much. So I'm going to invite our panelists to come back up to the front, and we're going to talk a little bit more about these tools. I want to note that we have all these available online. They're in editable formats. We didn't print out a ton because we don't want to create a lot of paper waste, but they're all ready and available, some in multiple languages. So we're going to kick off this part of the discussion with one major question for Jess, Delilah, Harisu, and Melissa, which is succinctly, what is a power and a pitfall of HCD according to your experience? And maybe I can start with Melissa on the end.
So very succinctly for me, as a designer, the power of HCD is leveraging the voices that you have in the field. And there was some comments in the other rooms that people sometimes don't know what they want. I disagree completely, because people know what they want, probably not visually, but we all know what is comfortable to go to the toilet, how comfortable it feels when you can close the door and be on your own. And, you know, so I would say that one of the powers is leveraging the voices and be very participatory in some of the solutions. The pitfalls is, in my perspective, is budgeting. One of the pitfalls is, how do you budget for prototyping? How much budget do you need for prototyping 1 month or for prototyping a couple of weeks in the field? How are you going to do it? But I think that pitfall can be exercised as you go with the project, and eventually you can put some budget and carve out at this point some budget for the prototyping. And yeah, I think those would be my 2 points.
Okay, so the power and the pitfalls. I agree with Melissa about the power, and I think it's not that people don't know about what they want. It's that maybe they weren't given enough space to think about it and to know, and that's why I think the participatory methods are really powerful, because it gives you the opportunity to realize when you verbalize, when you are given the voice, and then that's what I want. Maybe because you never realized you wanted that. But when you are asked and then you are talking, and when you are using your own words, you just realize, I want this. I want to be comfortable. I don't want to be uncomfortable. And also another thing is, and that is another power, is when you allow people like to bring, that's possible. It's not, sometimes we might think, and especially in Madagascar, we might think people in rural areas, they don't like the toilet, ceramic toilet. And that is a common thinking from people in the bigger towns. But when you are discussing, when you are giving opportunities to everyone, and especially people in the rural areas, they will say to you, we'd like this. But it's like, it's impossible for us. It's like, it's not for us. It's for people like you, but not for us. But when you make this like possible, and when you are thinking of it as something possible, because we are within a broader process of how to increase access to basic sanitation, and then it's like, yeah, I'd like to do it. I'd like to have this. Me too. Now I am part of the people who can use this kind of service and with this kind of product. So I think that is the power of HCD. Now pitfall, as I said earlier, I think HCD is very powerful, but I think it's not everything. Because, for example, in market-based sanitation approach, where there are a lot of other components that we need to support for it to work. Because, for example, just when you are, you have sales agents, and a sales agent, they need to know how to sell. And I think that is something that we discovered in another project in other countries. You might have the best product, you might have everything, but then if you don't know how to sell it, if you don't know how to pitch yourself, that won't work. So part of something bigger.
Thank you.
So for me, one of the power of HCD is there's great potential to use it to improve systems, although we tend to focus on just using it for individual behaviors, but there is actually power and potential to use it to improve systems. I mean, we were talking throughout this week about improving systems and working with governments and local institutions. There is really potential for HCD to be used for that. And then as a pitfall, we talk about action research, we talk about qualitative research. Very good when you're out there and talking to people, but just putting the information together and making sense out of it can actually be a challenge. And if you don't do that well, you're likely to lose some key information that is needed for the next phase. So it is always important. And with HCD, the recommendation is always, you don't go and say the one who's doing the research, you don't go and write on your own, but you write together with the people that you're involving in collecting data or talking to people. So just putting the information together, making sense of it, and using it for the creation phase can be a potential pitfall if it is not done well and tactfully.
Oh, thank you. Jess, from your side?
Yeah, it's really, really valuable. And I've seen the power of HCD to really unlock stuck problems. We talk about these like challenges. I'm meeting next week with a team to try and hack the tippy tap. And it's this idea of being able to use HCD to step back, to take off kind of our expert hats, whatever that might mean or be, and to think about things in new creative ways. But it requires ability to, and this is the pitfall, I think, it's really easy to get distracted in an HCD project. There's a lot of other things going on. There's a lot of competing tasks. And what it requires is this kind of space for extreme creativity, which can't be bothered by budget meetings and team calls and all the other things that keep us busy during the day when we're program people. And so that's kind of a challenge. I mean, it's a challenge, not a pitfall, but it can the process can fail when we're pulled in lots of different directions and don't have that time for just creativity. So those would be mine. Back to you, Nicole.
Thank you. So I'd like to give an opportunity for our audience to share, any power or pitfall of HCD that you've seen or that you are thinking about or that you have a concern about. Any thoughts out there in the audience, or for those of you online, you can put your thoughts in the chat and we'll be sure to somehow see them. Yeah, go ahead.
I was wondering about I feel like it's been some of these HCD approaches applied with sort of small to medium scale initiatives. And I was wondering how they fit in. I think you mentioned they could work in a larger systems approach with governments, or and how you can see those two fitting together, especially in the context of projects like the one I worked on in Zambia and in Lusaka. Sort of there's a contractual process, there's lots of tenders going out, there's large companies, then construct or build and construct toilets. So how do you see an incorporation of that creative process of these small to medium scale approaches with these larger scale investments?
Yeah, let's get another question.
Yeah, so my question is, how do you resolve when there's conflict on type of solution the community is coming to, especially if it's like there are females and males in the household and they want totally different things and they're receiving one toilet. or just on a community level, if you're implementing this human-centered design, do you typically go with the system where there's the most consensus on that people want that, or are you tailoring it to every single household?
So far we have a question, and maybe we can take those two and then take others. So what does HCD look like with small and medium enterprises? And then how do you resolve when there's conflict with inclusive groups, and looking at how would you resolve if people want different things or have different needs? So maybe Melissa, you want to take the first question, and then we can ask someone to take the second.
So for the first question, I would say that the design process or the HD process is sector agnostic, and it doesn't depend on how big or small the company or the organization is. It's a creative process that you can use at any moment of the moment when you are facing a challenge that you don't know exactly how to untangle or what would be the potential solution. So usually the design process could start in the international development sector. It starts at the beginning of when it's a project. It's not a big program. When you have a program already and then you face a challenge is where you can implement again the HED process. So HED is very iterative, going back to the iteration, not just the iteration when you are doing prototypes, but you can do a design process and eventually you have another challenge that you didn't foresee. And then you can go again through the same process to understand how you can tackle that specific problem. So I would say that it's, yeah, sector agnostic, and it doesn't matter how big or small the organization is.
Yeah. Maybe Delilah for the next question, as it ties nicely to difference mapping.
So remember that diagram that HCD tries to balance solutions that meet desirability, feasibility, and viability. So while there's everything that people may want, so there's some things that are desirable, but they may not be feasible, they may not be viable. So what it means is that you need to continue discussing and designing. I mean, again, the iterative process of going back until you find that sweet balance. Otherwise, you end up constructing 10 latrines in one household, so you suit the needs of the different people within that setting. But it's, I think, the continuation to engage, to come up with potential solutions and have people review and see until you can try and strike a balance to suit the needs of the different people you're trying to serve.
Oh yeah, you had a question first? Tina.
Another question actually was, it asked if there were other pitfalls to mention, and this is something that came up as the three speakers were talking, but I think something that is worth emphasizing. I think a major pitfall is that because HCD is based so much on qualitative and how people feel, right? There has to be a balance between when you're introducing that into the final product, not forget the rigor that needs to be done to make sure that the impact or the effectiveness of something like a latrine is not diminished. Exactly. So with the example of the BVIP in Zimbabwe, quite a great deal of investigation went into that design. And if we're going to be introducing certain aspects to the BVIP, based on people's suggestions and qualitative data and their feelings of what makes them feel safe, we have to at least put in as much rigor into investigating what that will do to the effectiveness of the latrine, introducing doors, what that does to airflow, and lighting and flies and all of those small aspects that the folk that the Blair Institute many years ago put a lot of work into.
So such a good point, and I think so key, something maybe that wasn't mentioned about the need for a multidisciplinary team. So designers and engineers, or in the projects that some of you working with engineers, working with social and behavior change to look at those different dimensions. Go ahead.
Can I jump in really quickly? Is it possible?
Yes, you can.
I'm so sorry. Just to echo what Tino, I think it was Tino, you were saying, like, it's this balance between what is technically feasible, and that doesn't just mean what we can what we can do, but what also is good. So we're trying to balance with an HCD. I like to call it the manifest, what people say out loud, and the latent, what we know they need, and balancing those two needs so that we're actually designing solutions that not people don't just want, but actually work. So it's tricky finding that place in the middle. So just to echo and totally agree, and I'll stop talking. Thanks.
So kind of related and also like a pitfall, is you see a lot of times too that these processes perpetuate biases, and something that's very integral of this process is who you're calling to the table to begin with. And so I guess from the perspective of researchers and engineers, how are we making sure that we are in fact like getting the people at the table who need to be at the table to participate, not only like how we get them to participate, but how we make sure that we find them and include them correctly in these processes.
Exactly. Yeah. Very good. Thanks for that. A quick, I guess it's a question. And because you're a behavior change advisor, so as part of this process, kind of along with the lines of both of the previous speakers, but also different. Are there things that you noted that something that you needed to work on later, like unrelated to the HED? Like, for example, if it was only women were saying, oh, I want the latrine to look like this because it's easier to clean. Right. And so you noted over here, we need to talk to men about cleaning latrines or something. I'm just interested in whether the HCD process also helped you identify other things you needed to include in your project later on.
Yeah, certainly.
Thank you so much. And thanks so much for the question, because this was one that I had for the panelists around inclusion, and you were much more eloquent when you said the question. So please, who would like to respond to both of them?
Yeah, very well so. Yeah, because you're talking to different groups of people already, you start to see the dynamics within the people that you're working with, and also see some nuances, identifying some things that you probably did not have at the start of it. And certainly that is one of those things that come up. And the other thing in terms of behavior change is you start seeing that maybe awareness level is low, like in our case. We then identified that, and similar to the comment that was made earlier, that people did not understand the key safety features of a BVIP. So people were building these fancy things, but that were violating. Actually, the toilet that I showed there, when you went in there, it was smelly and there were lots of flies the moment you opened there. So they built this beautiful structure, but then it has issues because the safety features of the original design were violated. So that actually came in with some of the behavior change or the awareness raising that we needed to do to make sure that people understand it's not just the structure you're building, but there's science that is behind it. So certainly, the HCD process allows you to identify some of these nuances, gender-related norms that need to be addressed as part of designing the solution.
Maybe on the conclusion.
Okay, so I think HCD allows us really to understand deeper. I just want to share what happened in the region where we did the HCD process. So there are very gender-specific challenges, like, for example, in this region, the faces of women and men can't be mixed. So, like when we did the HCD process, it was like we could discover what kind of solutions can be designed, what kind of toilets, what kinds of fit can help support these households with particular practices, so they can use the toilets sustainably. So I think the HCD is really helpful with all the different tools to be used.
Yeah, I think that is a very good point, because I would say one of the pitfalls is that although HCD should be inclusive, sometimes it's not inclusive because of the people that we invite to be part of those co-creation sessions. So let's acknowledge that HCD is not, it doesn't mean that the product is going to be inclusive. it means that it will allow for more participation, but it's up to us to bring those voices into the table. One thing that we do when we go to do the exploration is we interview extremes. So what does that mean? We interview people, for example, in the case of the twins, because those have been the examples, but we interview people that have never used a toilet and the people that have used a toilet, or the people that have built a toilet and the people that have never built a toilet. So in that case, what we do is we try to map out the different ranges of possible solutions or possible barriers and challenges that people have faced in that spectrum. So of course, we're not going to be interviewing everyone, and we are not as M&E or like Merle or monitoring and the evaluation that they can do more, they can get more data. Interviewing, for example, 100 people or 200 people. Like when I've done this work, I've interviewed already 100 people, but in depth. So the numbers behind it, I am able to explain why it is the reason because of behind the graph that we're seeing. And I would say that going back to your point of design and we look into the feelings and emotions. Yes, we do that. But also we have the rigor that some people have in the numbers. So I think that it has been a misconception that when you hone in into the feelings or emotions or the qualitative data, it's not as rigorous as quantitative. And I would say that is completely not true. You need to have both. You can have the data and the graphic, but from the graphic, you won't know what was the reason behind it. And from the work that we do, we're able to articulate that. And we're able to put solutions to those challenges that we're seeing. So I would say that it's a combination. And as Nicole also was saying, we have in our team and in most of the teams that I've seen in HD, you have designers that we know how to use Excel and quantitative data. So in this case, we are always putting the rigor behind of the things that we're saying. And although we use the sticky notes, which is really fun, those are also data points that we are transforming, and that they're going to be more visual to the people if we need to explain the reason behind the research that we're doing. Yeah, I would say those are the points.
Anything you want to add, Jess, on inclusion?
Yeah, I think sorry, turn my video on. I think that there's so many ways of opportunities to be more inclusive in the process. And I think the extremes is a great way, but I think HCD within a program cycle is it's not just one thing you do and then you walk away. It's a continuous approach. And you might do HCD to identify a toilet design that works for a lot of people. And then you decide that you really need to focus in on individuals with disability and then use HCD in that particular context. And so I see it as more of a spiral where you're using it in multiple different approaches and applications and recognizing that your solution will never work for everybody. That's the challenge. And so you'll start with as many people as you can, and then you work to continue that cycle over and over until you're able to create a variety of solutions that do meet a variety of needs, because we do have different needs as people. Yeah, back to you, Nicole.
Great, thank you. Good. Is it a question or a comment? A comment, okay. One last comment in the audience.
Hi, I'm Rana from IDE. I'm based in Cambodia. And I just wanted to kind of reiterate, hi Jess, also. But yeah, HCD is an agile thinking. It's an iteration process. And I think beyond it being in funding, I guess it's something that you can use within programming when you actually put it within the actual culture and the actual steps within the teams of engineering, technical, as well as any part of the system. Even though kind of what's been said, even though we know what some solutions have been done and existing, there's always these aspirations that change over time. And one of the things that we've been doing a lot in Cambodia is upgrading products as well. So you can have an existing pit, and then you can add another pit, which is an alternating rule pit, and create an offsite FSM system, for example. So it's really building on everything that's there and continuing to ask those questions to the population. And the last point, I guess, that maybe hasn't been brought up is when it comes to, let's say, a market-based approach, HCD is really not at that design phase only. And it really doesn't just include, let's say, households.
Yeah.
You can also include entrepreneurs within that model to ensure that, let's say, the materials and different parts of that product or service that you're providing is something that you're taking into account in terms of constructability, in terms of cost, in terms of all these things. And so you can add these criteria to HCD and make it more technical in a sense of having all these different teams within HCD that allow you to get to really a solution that is a bit more wholesome depending on the use and context that you're doing. Yeah, thanks.
Thank you. So as you noted earlier, first of all, I want to thank the panelists and I want to thank everyone for asking good questions. The objective of the session was both to talk about HCD, but also reflect on the process. And I think throughout the week, that has been a theme on reflecting on how are we working on WASH research and learning and our activities, and what are ways that we can be more inclusive, how can we support better localization, as well as all of the complex challenges around implementation and what that looks like. So not just implementing, but also pausing and reflecting and thinking about what are we doing and how are we doing it, and what does that mean for those that we work with. So I want to thank everyone for preparing and working with us on this session. We have these resources that are available, hcdforwash.org. There's also other resources that we wanted to highlight that we drew on for this presentation and for the work that we do. And we'd also love to hear from you. If you're working on HCD for WASH and you have case studies or examples that you'd like to share with us, we'd love to add them to the HCD for WASH website and continue to add more from any component of WASH. We'd love to have more examples. So there's a Google form here and a QR code, and we can share this with you afterwards as well. And so as we wrap up, I would love for you to join us on ahaslides.com again. You can use the QR code or join with the code and hear from you what went well today, what didn't go well. As we talked from the beginning, we try to be iterative, we try to give feedback, we'll try to adapt. I think there's a lot of energy in the room around this topic, and so I don't think this will be the last time we'll work together and work with you on this, continuing this discussion. And also our panelists, I'm sure, would be happy to stay around and answer any questions or thoughts that you might have. So, yeah. In full transparency, as soon as I get to maybe 10 or 15, I'll show the results. Yes. And there's the next question, which is what didn't go well. So I'd love for you to just stay for a couple of minutes and answer our questions. I don't know if it advances. I think I have to advance the slide first.
Come on.
Yeah, there we go. We'll go to the next one. What could be improved? And thank you, Jess, for joining us late in Switzerland. And
my pleasure. I love HCD and WASH, so.
We're happy to also share the slide deck, and as I noted, all the tools are on the QR code that is in our presentation. All right. More debate, longer session, more use of the tool, and deeper dive. Sorry. These are all great questions to continue for the future. Very good.
I think so. Yes, yes. What about